Colombia, pero a la vez portador de un pensamiento heterodoxo como pocos en Estados Unidos. Jeffrey Sachs es prácticamente un premio Nobel. Hablamos con él sobre Argentina, sobre el futuro de la economía mundial y sobre la relación con el Fondo Monetario, muchos de cuyos ejecutivos, de sus hombres de negro, fueron alumnos del propio Sachs. La segunda parte de la entrevista a continuación.
Do you think there is a space for Argentina's leaders to tell the IMF that austerity measures implied in this agreement are not feasible? I mean, if there were an agreement between the leaders of different parties to say that to the IMF, would it have an effect?
Yes, but I think the argument has to be made technocratically and in the following sense. It's not so much Argentina saying such and such is not feasible. What is really right to say is such and such is not necessary. In other words, why are you imposing fiscal austerity when that's not really the issue that's facing our country? That's the argument to make. So the argument to make is more a technical argument. And this government has made that argument effectively. And I helped, and other economists helped, when Martin Guzman was negotiating the IMF agreement in 2020, and then again in 2021 and 2022. I said personally to the IMF staff, I showed them tables like I'm describing right now. Compare Argentina with the US, with Japan, with Italy. Who has more debt? Who has larger budget deficits? So what are you talking about? The problem is a financial market problem. It's not a fiscal problem. Well, they had to listen because it was a technical, sound, correct argument. And of course, it was counterintuitive. Even when I say this in Argentina, people say, that can't be true. You know, this government's completely irresponsible. But they don't look at data. So people believe lots of things until they look at the data. And the arguments that I think can be successful are technical arguments. It's very hard to make the case to the IMF, allow us to do something irresponsible because it's an election year and we just can't do something responsible. That argument won't work. But an argument that can work is to say, why are you pressing for measures X, Y, and Z when that's clearly not the problem facing our country? And I think in the case of Argentina, the main problem facing Argentina is the complete and total lack of normal financial access. And the IMF's role in this world and why it was created in 1945 is to address that fact, not just to say austerity, but to say we know because of the long history of this country that Argentina has a terrible problem in the financial markets. The financial markets believe the worst no matter what. And we know that an extraordinary amount of money was given by the IMF to President Macri a few years ago, and it's falling due. And it would just be destructive of us as an institution to create yet another financial crisis because of something from the past, not something that is needed this moment. So these are technical arguments that I think can and should be made, and professionals should make them. And not only that, professionals around the world should help Argentina to make them.
After Martin Guzman was gone, the new financial minister, Sergio Massa, accepted tightening the fiscal path, and strong austerity measures were taken. Do you think it can avoid Argentina to grow again in 2023? What effect do you think it can have?
Basically, I am not up to date on the month-to-month developments, and so I'm not really able to talk about the immediate situation as I was, say, 2 years ago. Of course, I'm a partisan for Argentina, and I don't want Argentina to get hurt in this mess. And so I want the IMF to do the right thing, which is to really understand Argentina's specific characteristics, its specific difficulty of being a country that has no access to capital markets, even though it's a big modern economy that should have absolute normal access to capital markets. It doesn't. So I want the IMF to understand that reality. In general, my whole approach economically is also to say, don't look at the next 6 months or a year. We're talking about economies that need a 5 or 10 year perspective. Argentina needs investment. It needs to be able to grow. It should not be suffering through arbitrary austerity. If there's wasted spending, by all means, it should be eliminated, or if there are subsidies that make no sense socially or economically, I'm not going to argue for them. But as a general matter, Argentina does not have too much debt. It is not insolvent. It is not having any of the characteristics of a fiscal crisis. Argentina needs to have a renewed financial environment in which it can be a normal economy performing in a normal way. That's been not true for a very long time, and that's what the IMF should be working on and what the government should be working with the IMF to accomplish.
In that kind of scenario, inflation could be addressed as well. I mean, something like 100% inflation in a year is really high to address and to lower.
I would like any Argentine economist or anyone else to justify to me why Argentina's fundamentals have anything to do with triple-digit inflation. Again, to my view, and I've looked at balance sheets of governments for 40 years, there is nothing in Argentina's fiscal balance sheet that has any reason to have triple-digit inflation. The reason that Argentina is in triple-digit inflation is a self-fulfilling ongoing crisis that nobody trusts Argentina, including Argentines, by the way, who always think the peso is going to lose value, who always think there's going to be a new financial crisis, who always thinks that the IMF is going to cut off Argentina, or there's going to be a default, or there's going to be an election year crisis. And so there's always a flight from the currency. Everybody's got dollars, everybody's got pesos, everybody's running to dollars at the slightest the slightest worry, and you end up with inflation rates that are extraordinary, that have absolutely nothing to do with the fundamental realities of Argentina. And I can tell you, if you look at Japan, for example, which has no inflation at all, the public debt in Japan is vastly higher relative to national income than in Argentina. And the deficits have been huge. And Japan has no inflation at all. And Argentina has very modest deficits, rather modest debt, and it has triple-digit inflation. This is not fundamentals. This is an ongoing, self-fulfilling crisis. And frankly, Argentines are always expecting the worst, and they're often getting it. And they hear some rumor, or the IMF's not going to do this, and it's a flight to the dollar.